All right. Today we've got Antimony Resources with Jim Atkinson, CEO, who's got a presentation for us. Jim, take it away. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Okay, good, good. So this is Antimony Resources Corp, a company listed CSE, ATMY, but also listed in Frankfurt and on the OTCQB in the United States. So we have forward-looking statements, of course, that's always the way. And this, for some reason, the thing on the side is kind of blocking part of it, but hopefully you can see the whole thing.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So we like to talk about our management a little bit because, one of the things that we understand about doing this kind of exploration is to have sort of people and persons and staff that are familiar with antimony, not only antimony exploration, but the importance of it. And again, I'm the CEO. I have over 45 years of experience in the business. I've worked really, my antimony experience comes from working at the Lake George antimony mine in New Brunswick, which at the time was the only producing antimony mine in North America and supplied about 4% of the global demand of high-grade antimony concentrate. I've also worked for other companies, major and juniors, throughout the world, but also mainly focused on base metals and gold, and a little bit of other kinds of things. One of the things that my experience is I was part of a team that was reviewing, evaluating, and acquiring mineral projects all around the world. We studied a lot of them, so we have I have experience of kind of doing that, and I've managed large teams of personnel, which is what everybody eventually gets to do. The one thing that I'm very proud of is our, let's call it, on-site bench strength. We have 24 personnel working there. We have 2 PhD geologists dedicated to detailing the core, logging, geological interpretation, that kind of stuff. And 8 of our team members actually come from the local Sussex community. So we're pretty happy to be able to be creating some local employment and also supporting some of the economy in the region. Our drilling company comes from is a local company, comes from the village is called Penobsquist, if you know how to spell that. Anyway, and so we're combining this experience that we have in exploration, in financing, and also in other technical fields to try to advance this project. So I don't know, and I always ask this question when I start talking about the project, how much people actually know about antimony. I call antimony the most important metal nobody knows about. Now that's changing lately because more and more people are actually becoming to understand how important antimony is. I like to look at it sort of from 2 points of view. The first are the industrial applications. A military use is very important. Every munition, every piece, every bullet, every piece of artillery has antimony in it. And this is in the front end to strengthen the lead, but also in the back end as an igniter for the powder that actually sets off the explosion to initiate the firing. It's also used in the military as its other aspect of industrial use, which is antimony trioxide is a very important and a very good flame retardant. So in the military, it's used, military tents are sprayed with antimony trioxide as a flame retardant. It's also used in plastics. You probably have it in your automobile because it's used in automobile upholstery. And you definitely have it in your automobile if you drive a standard type automobile because it's used in lead acid batteries to lengthen the length of the lead in the battery. It's also used, in other fields in small amounts in semiconductors and those kind of things. It's an alloy metal, so it's used in many places in sort of small amounts to add some kind of property that is important to the metal. So again, it's used as lead as a strengthener. It's used in other kinds of things, like it's used in some kinds of solder. But I think the second most important use is on the geopolitical and supply chain side. So over 70% of the antimony come from China. In 2024, they cut off all export of China. So it's recognized as a critical mineral in the US, in the UA, and almost all industrial countries in the world. And it has limited global sources. So there's some supply chain importance there. And we know that, the growing geopolitical tensions. So what I think is developing is an independent source in North America to secure these applications for antimony. So let's talk about why antimony resources. So we do offer investors exposure to North America's highest grade antimony project. And we think this is the highest grade project, not only in North America, probably in the world. It's well located to secure that supply chain that has become very important to reduce foreign dependence in North America. And it's located in a stable, low-risk jurisdiction, not only in Canada, but also in the province of New Brunswick, which is one of the better places to do exploration in Canada. And, we are aligned to supply materials for the supply chain for various types of uses that we talked about already. Just quickly on the map side there, you can see that we're about 75 kilometers away from the deep sea port of St. John's, and we're situated in southern New Brunswick, and I like to mention this, only about 80 kilometers from the US border. Whoops. So this shows our location. I don't know how familiar you are with southern New Brunswick, but Fredericton, you can see up in the top left corner, that's the capital city. Moncton is in the right, that's the largest city. And St. John, where the deep sea port is located, is in the south. And we're kind of in the middle of that three-pointed triangle. We're very close to the town of Sussex. You can see there our people come from the general vicinity of Sussex, and the drilling company is also based in Sussex. So our drilling costs and our maintenance costs for our staff is very low. On the right side, you can see the property. It's a fairly large property. It has 3,700 hectares, all within those sort of red outlines. I just point to the middle claim in the center. That's really where all of our work has occurred. But we've also outlined and discovered antimony, not resources, antimony occurrences on some of the other properties in the group there. So Bald Hill is a well-known high-grade antimony deposit. It was discovered in 2005 by one of the government geologists who was mapping in the area and discovered boulders of stibnite. Stibnite is the mineral that hosts the antimony. She discovered boulders of stibnite in the area, and a prospector picked it up from 2008 until 2014, 15. It was actually explored by a New Brunswick government. They drilled about 5,000 meters. Since then, we've drilled over 30,000 meters, and we've outlined a deposit that shows they're 700 meters long to a depth of 300 meters, and it averages probably 3 to 4 meters in width. This is only what we call the main zone. We have 3 other zones of mineralization, which we've identified. One was identified when we were putting in a drill road on the west side of the property. The dozer and the excavator actually dug up large boulders of stibnite-bearing material. And the other 2 zones were known before from very brief exploration programs, but there was no detailed work on those. So we had a technical report put out in March of 2025, and you can see the potential that they estimated 2.7 million tons, grading between 3 and 4% antimony, and open in all directions. We have had some preliminary test work done, metallurgical test work, and it shows a recovery of about 46% antimony, which would produce a high-grade antimony concentrate grading about 65% antimony. So why is Bald Hill so important? Well, it's a proven district, for instance, located in New Brunswick, as I mentioned, which is home to the former Lake George antimony mine, which I worked at, which at the time was North America's only antimony producer. and it supplied about 4% of the world antimony demand. And I remember that the concentrate was so high grade that companies used to buy the concentrate to mix with their material and up the concentrate grade. So on this property, we had some historic drilling. And one thing about the New Brunswick government is they preserve all the drill core that's been done on this property. So when we went to the property in the first place, we had about 5,400 meters of drilling to have a look at. As I mentioned, New Brunswick, top tier jurisdiction, probably the best place to operate in Canada. In our case, we have lots of infrastructure, forestry, and roads. And I mentioned the deep sea port, 75 meters away. The location is very strategic. So the New Brunswick government has applied a lot of modern technology to this area. We have total LiDAR coverage, still sampling, soil sampling, stream sediment mapping, all that stuff. And we've since added some LiDAR and a lot of 3D modeling. And that gives us, I think, sort of an exploration edge over other areas where a lot of this, let's call it primary or preliminary information, has to be gathered by the proponent. So why should we be looking at antimony resources right now? Well, we'll see that we have a fairly low market cap, and we have the very high grade Bald Hill project, and we think it offers significant reevaluation potential. We think this is time for Western governments to secure non-Chinese supply, and that's what we can do with this project. Again, previous operators, 2005, 2018, 2014, were constrained by low antimony prices and lack of capital. And at that time, antimony had little strategic advantage because it was being very, very nicely supplied by China. But, rising prices, supply security concerns, and critical metal demand have transformed, we think, the market. We combined very modern technology. You'll see that we use AI. We have massive databases which AI is used to actually interrogate. And, I think it allows us to unlock the potential of this project. On the right-hand side, it's not too clear, but one of the things about antimony exploration, which is great, is that you can see this stuff. And you'll see in the bottom part of this section of drill core, you can see the black sections. That's massive stibnite. As I mentioned, stibnite is the mineral that hosts the antimony in this case. So, sorry. The other thing about this project is the grade, as I've mentioned several times. And you can see, significant grades and widths in this table. We think the average is going to be in the order of 3 to 4%. And the widths will be in the order of average of 3 to 4 meters wide, so 10 to 15 feet wide. These are some of the assays that we have from some of our 25 drilling. You can see almost 10% over 4 meters. That's pretty significant. And within those sections, we often have very high grade intersections. In drill hole 4, for instance, there are 3 sections over 15%. 28% in hole 8. These are the kinds of things that we find. As I mentioned, the average width we think is going to be in the order of 3 to 4 meters, but we do have areas where we have much wider zones. You can see there in drill hole 5, 14.5 meters there. And interestingly, this is borehole 2505. That means it was drilled in 2025. In our borehole 2605, we have a very wide section, and in our drill hole 2615, we have a 15-meter section of mineralization. So, as I said, the averages are smaller, but we do have sections where it's much greater. This shows the surface trace of the mineralization. You can see the trend. All the pink dots are surface projection of intersections, and you can see the trend is basically sort of north-northwest, south-southeast. I would just mention here for the geologists that are listening, all the stratigraphy in this area strikes to the northeast. So this zone, which is dominantly a breccia zone with some shearing, actually trends and cuts right across the regional stratigraphy. And one of the things that we're wondering about is whether these zones where the mineralization gets much wider, does this have something to do with changes in stratigraphy that is crossing? We have drilled so far 43 drill holes in this section. We've drilled drill holes other places on the property. And I would just mention to the south of the main zone, you can see an area where we've done some trenching and we've actually started drilling in this area. We call this the central zone. And this has antimony in the form of stibnite mineralization on surface and in trenches. And we've now intersected, let's call it stibnite bearing breccias in drilling. We don't have any assays yet. Those are pending. Sorry. I'm just talking a little bit about the potential new zones. The Marcus West zone was discovered when we were putting in a drill road. They dug up some high-grade antimony boulders. The central zone was trenched in 2014, but they never got to really do any work on it. You can see 2.8% antimony over 81 meters from channel sampling, and the south zone was also trenched in 2014, 9% antimony over 2.6 meters. Both the central zone and the south zone have been trenched extensively by us, and both of those have now been exposed over 200 meters. The south zone, I put out a press release. The average of, I think it was 34 grab samples was 19.5%. So we know these zones contain high-grade antimony. We just have not had enough drilling to actually do any definition of them. And this is a long section of the main zone where you can see most of the drilling has been done, but it also includes the areas to the south. And in the center of this diagram, you see a few drill holes there with some hits, nothing really spectacular. This is the central zone. We now think that this is much better than is represented on this long section. And you can see on the far right side, this is the south zone. And we know this has been exposed over 150 meters. And we, as I mentioned, had average grab samples of 34% antimony. This is about 1.5 kilometers long, this trace. This is what we consider the main mineralizing area. But I would mention that the west zone, which we talked about, is actually situated in this area, but it's about 150 meters further to the west and is probably a parallel zone. So we want to know what kind of catalysts are coming up. Well, of course, continuous news flow is what we aim for. Ongoing drill results from the main zone, but also some initial drill results from the new zones, especially the central zone, which is really being drilled right now. We're going to be completing between 15 and 18,000 meters of drilling in the next 4 months. That's 50% focused on the main zone. The aim of that will be to explore expansion, but also somewhat to fill in some of the gaps in the data. And 50% will be dedicated to testing the new targets and discoveries, including some new ones which we haven't even really done much work with, which were discovered by soil sampling about 3 kilometers to the south of the main zone. We're looking at putting out a maiden resource in the fall of this year, fall or early winter, sorry. We think by that time we will have enough information on this project. We're aiming for 50-meter spacing on our drilling in the main zone, and we expect that that will be sufficient. We've hired SRK. We're working with them to make sure that we have enough information for them to be able to do a resource. We're also working on the permitting side of things. So we have environmental work going on. We have a group that's looking after our permit pathway, and we expect to have a permit application for late 2026, early 2027. And of course, exploration growth, we have lots of newly discovered zones. We'll be doing really soil sampling over the whole 3,700 hectares that we have. And we like to have some comparables, although we like to believe there's no comparison. to our project, but we do have some antimony things to talk about. Everybody knows about Perpetua, the project in Idaho. It is a large gold deposit that also has antimony. I would mention that the antimony grade there is 0.064%. We have U.S. Antimony, which is really has a smelter and operations in Thompson Falls in Montana. They really don't have a lot of source for material for their smelter, but they are taking in material from America's Gold and Silver Galena project in the Silver Valley. Nev Gold is a project that actually is trying to redo a bunch of tailings. Those tailings run about, I think, about 1/10 of a gram of gold and about a 0.2% antimony. But because they don't have to mine it, they just have to basically dig it up. They think they'll be able to process it. And the company we like to compare ourselves to is Larvato. This is a project in Australia. It's a rehabilitation and reinitiation of a gold antimony project that was mined in the past. I would mention that their grade is about, I think, 1.5 grams gold and about 1% antimony. Their combined gold equivalent grade is 7 grams. Their ore is starting to be mined, and they expect to start mining that in the next half year. The reason we like to compare with them is a very similar situation. Basically, they have veins, they have some gold and some antimony. Ours is mainly antimony, but we do have a tiny bit of gold, and that's why we compare it that. And one of the things I like to tell people in this comparison thing is the value of their ore based on their information is about $850 a ton US. Now, if you take a look at our project and you want to do the silly things they do with gold equivalent, our gold equivalent is 12 grams per ton, and the value is worth about $1,350 a metric ton. Now, always, of course, dependent, you can recover it and all that stuff, all those kind of provisos that people talk about. But I think the most important thing about this chart is the market caps. And you can see how high the other projects are and how low we are, basically. And we think that's why there's a tremendous potential for re-rating. Just a quick rundown of the cap table. About 100 million common shares outstanding, 27 million warrants, some of which are in the money, and about 23 million options, fully diluted, about 160 million shares. We have about $4 million in the bank in cash. That is enough to fund our exploration budget for the next 6 months. And we have a very tight holding amongst management and insiders. I would also mention that we have a couple of big funds, Dynamic and Bellbrook, each of which own about 9.9%, and they both, top up whenever we do a financing. So again, financial strength, we're fully funded for the exploration activities. We will be focused on creating a resource in the main zone within the next probably half year. We have a strong shareholder base, not only with people like Dynamic Funds and Delbrook, but also with our retail group. They are also very strong for us. And we are backed by an experienced U.S. investment bank. Dominari and the Revere, both based in New York, have been very supportive of us. They funded us for $10 million back in December. So again, final thoughts. Highest grade antimony project in North America, sub 100 million market cap, 2.7 million tons of exploration potential, open in all directions and down dip. We have very good metallurgical recovery, and we have a strong upside from our ongoing drilling and also our resource growth. As we mentioned, we have an experienced management, and we have very highly trained people on site doing the work of logging, trying to understand the geology and trying to exactly determine what's happening there. And we're close to infrastructure, including ports, highways, and power. We're about 150 kilometers away from the Point Lepreau power station, nuclear power plant, and New Brunswick Hydro would be only too happy to have us start using their stuff. And again, one of the best locations to explore in Canada. The New Brunswick government has put together what they call a strategic metals strategy, and they're talking about focusing on trying to have one window approvals and 60 day turnaround. And we can work all year there. We do get winter, but it doesn't seem to stop us too much. So that's kind of it. Sorry it was so quick, but it was 26 minutes, which I think is not too bad.
No, that's perfect, Jim. A very interesting project. Mickey, you're up first with questions.
Yeah, thanks for a succinct presentation. We don't always get that, Jim. So from what I can tell, this is an accreted terrain. It's low temperature, high pressure, metamorphic rocks, and therefore you're going to be structurally controlled. I noticed you've done some structural work on it, but the question would be, I saw no mention of oriented core. Can you address that?
Yes, we haven't used oriented core. Again, because the structure that carries the mineralization actually trends almost at right angles across the stratigraphy, we have really been focusing more on trying to understand that structure. The stratigraphy itself is well known to contain base metals and VMS, it's rhyolites and felsics and sedit. And so there's that, but you're right. We have not done oriented core for two reasons. First of all, this is going to sound wrong, but we're not that concerned with the wall rocks, except to note that they are very stable wall rocks, according to our RQD information. But we do have detailed geology of the wall rocks so that we can answer those kinds of questions. You're right. Oriented core is one of the things we're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, I would very much encourage you, because it looks to me from what I know of the area and the geologic setting, so at least two periods of very high pressure deformation. So you probably got transposed layering. And so what you consider the sedimentary rocks could be 90 degrees from rotated from the original. That's the way a lot of these things go. The next question would be, I gather that you have massive arsenopyrite stibnite in these zones. 46% antimony recover in the 43101. I noticed that a lot of the stibnite is intimately mixed with arsenopyrite. So how do you address that issue? And then a follow-up on that would be, where's the nearest flotation mill? Would you plan on building your own flotation mill? And where do you get it smelted? Because it's going to require smelting.
Right. So two answers to that. First of all, you're right. There is a lot of arsenopyrite, but we know from the preliminary metallurgical work that we can produce a 65% antimony concentrate. And if you take a look at the chemistry of stibnite, you realize that 65% antimony means almost pure stibnite. So the metallurgy is working very well. You're right. We'll end up with a product that's probably mostly arsenopyrite and pyrite, but we're thinking, because we've now started to take a look at the little bit of gold that's there. There's about 1 gram per ton gold in average in this deposit. And we've started to take a look at that and trying to figure, okay, if we have this rougher con that has arsenopyrite and pyrite and gold, what can we do to that to get the gold out and leave the arseno and the pyrite behind? And that's something that we're working on right now. It's going to be a challenge, because you're right, because there's arsenopyrite there, the tailings aspect of it will become very important. As far as where we can go to get it treated, we probably will end up having to build our own mill, but there is a possibility of a mill that's only 150 kilometers away, and that's the Mount Pleasant mill, which is a 6,000 ton per day mill, which is way more than we need, but maybe part of that could be dedicated to our stuff, and we would then have direct shipping ore from our project. As far as the next stage of processing, there aren't a lot of smelters in the world. Of course, there's a smelter in Montana, And there's a smelter in Oman, which is starting to run up again. And there's a brand new smelter in Southern Australia. So because we're close to water, close to deep sea ports, putting the stuff on a ship is pretty reasonable for shipping it almost anywhere, even as far as Australia, maybe. Those are things for the mining engineers to answer.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mickey. Nick, looks like you're up next.
Hi, James. Thank you for your
Hello.
presentation. Question on just antimony in general. So it has not been profitable to produce this stuff in North America for many years. What has changed?
Well, what has
Possibly
changed is the price of antimony concentrate has gone from, let's say, $8,000 a metric ton to about $35,000 a metric ton. So that's changed for one thing. I think the other thing that's changed, there have been some changes in technology. And one of the things that some companies, including ourselves, are studying is whether or not by hydrometallurgical means you could actually produce antimony metal right on site, which would cut down the cost of shipping it and the cost of smelting. So there are some economic changes, I think, that have made quite a difference.
And what is the risk of China controlling so much of the production? Could they theoretically flood the market like they've done with rare earths to bankrupt other companies?
Well, yes, that is a definite possibility, but I actually have spoken to quite a few people who have been touring around in China, and they're saying China doesn't have enough antimony for their own needs. In fact, almost all of the mines in Australia which produce antimony ship their concentrate to China. So that is a possibility of it. So what I like to say is that if China suddenly floods the market, we will be the only mine standing because we're so high grade.
Sure. Can you give a high-level, big picture overview of the company's path to profitability?
Oh, okay. So as I said before, we are filing our permit application. That will be an application for development, assuming that the government's true to their word and it only takes 60 days. That means that we could easily be starting construction sometime in a year and a half and perhaps be producing in 3 years. I've done some very preliminary modeling using the University of Montana School of Mines model, which is a brilliant model. And that tells me that the capital cost would be in the order of 200 to 300 million, and the payback would be less than a year. After that, the project would probably generate around $200 million a year in cash flow. So profitability, I would say, yes, is very high.
Great. Thank you.
All
You're
right, thanks,
welcome.
Nick. Brent Cook, you're up.
Right, Jim, thanks.
Hi, Brad.
Hey, Mickey hit most of the metallurgical issues, which I guess
Sure.
was the main thing. I guess a comment on your website, the information that's out there, it's pretty minimal. That long section was useless to me. It'd be really good to have some more a long section, some cross sections to give us a feel for variability and such and what that vein really looks like.
Yes,
Just a suggestion.
you're right. That's something that we're working on. We actually have just started building a new website. And because we've just sort of completed our next phase of modeling, we now have some very good models which we can put on that. And I apologize, we didn't have it up to speed for this, but yes, you're right. We will have better sections and better long section.
What is your basic burn? I mean, you've got what, 24 people plus 2 PhDs.
Yeah, PhDs,
Excessive.
yeah, they're way too, no. So our basic burn rate, including drilling right now, so the drilling is very cheap there. And I would say our burn rate, and when I say including drilling, so our drilling cost, which is $200 a meter, includes everything. That's the drilling, logging, assays, accommodation, everything. That's the all-in cost. And we're doing about, let's say, 100 meters a day. So that'll give you a number for the month, which is about 600,000 a month. Our executive is very slim. We have a CFO, we have a CEO, and we have 2 advisors, and that works out to be about 80,000 a month. So that's really our total burn rate. Our legal costs are fairly minimal, and listing fees and the rest of those things. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we're doing.
All right, thanks. That's all I got. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Brian Lenny.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, James.
Hello.
The antimony market, how does the end product work or the concentrate work? Is the price determined on contracts, or is there a spot market? Like how does that work?
There's no spot market. In fact, if you look at 3 different places, you'll get 3 different prices.
Okay.
But you're right. Almost all sales are done by contract. And all the sales from Australia, for instance, which I mentioned, which go to China, those are all long-term contracts. Now, there is one smelter that's opened up. It's owned by Trafigura. It's in southern Australia. And they are getting concentrate right now from one operation in Western Australia. But yes, it's all done by contract.
Okay. And so when would you start that relationship to potentially sign an offtake agreement or an MOU, something like that?
I think once we have a resource, that's something we'll be able to talk about a little easier. We have talked, in fact, we've talked to the company that has an offtake agreement with Larvato, and that's what they told us. Yeah, we're very interested, but let's wait until we have a resource so that we can actually, put some numbers on paper and try to understand what it is that we have. And, now that we think we have some kind of gold resource, that gives us another opportunity to talk to people about offtake agreements.
Right. And well, in terms of the antimony, is there anything metallurgically that separates one con from another? Like in terms of maybe deleterious elements, but even in the contents of the concentrate itself?
No, there is, of course. If you can't get, say 65% antimony in your concentrate, you're going to have other stuff like arsenic and
Right.
iron and things like that. But from our original and initial metallurgical work, we can get 65%. And as I mentioned, 65% antimony is almost pure stibnite. So there's not a lot of anything. The rest of it's sulfur, right? So there's not a lot of really anything else. But yeah, that is something that you really have to control. And as I mentioned, when I worked for Lake George, that concentrate was so high grade that people used to buy it to mix with their concentrate to send to the smelter. And at Lake George, for instance, yes, there was some arsenopyrite, but again, it was dominantly stibnite. And that's why we had such a good quality concentrate.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lawrence, please go ahead.
James, a very interesting project. A general comment. I don't think many people really appreciate the geological potential in that part of New Brunswick. You mentioned Mount Pleasant. There's other big deposits there as well. So
Yes.
great geological area to be in. Now, you're probably aware that Lake George is in a process.
Yes.
Can you comment on whether you might have any interest in adding that into your portfolio?
Well, let me tell you how the process works. So what the government said was they put out an expression of interest to do an exploration program on Mount Pleasant, on Lake George, up to $3 million. But they didn't guarantee that after you did the exploration program, you would actually get the lease. In fact, they said in public presentations that they might keep the lease themselves. So we decided to decline that because that's just a crazy situation. Now, I'm sure there will be somebody who will be interested in getting on. Lake George still has some potential. It has about 300,000 metric tons of material grading about 2%. A lot of that is in the pillars, of course, but there's still quite a lot of potential. It was not closed off a down dip or really a long strike. It was a long strike. The challenge with Mount Pleasant is it dips 35 degrees, and it's just the worst possible angle to do any kind of mining on.
Well, you've got your hands full with what you've got, so.
And we do that. We
Okay.
do that as well, yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence. Gary Bohm.
Jim, thanks for the presentation. So you're funded through basically the end of the year.
Yeah,
Jurisdiction is strong. It seems that the next value window depends on drilling and maiden resource progress
right.
rather than additional financing. What do you think, in your view, would take the company from basically the stage one exploration towards a higher level speculation phase?
Well, I think one of the two things I would say, first of all, I think the resource is going to do that because that will then give people something they can, write numbers against. But I think the second thing that's going to do that is the potential of the new zones that we've defined and how that turns out, how that drilling turns out. Any one of those three could actually add an additional potential to the project. You have to remember when we took over the project, there was only 5,400 meters of drilling. And, we're going to be putting at least that much or more in all three of our new zones. So those are the two things I think that will take us to the next level.
Are you expecting the resource to be in before the next financing or after?
Yeah, I can't really say. We haven't made a financing decision as such yet, because we are funded for what we plan on doing. But again, we're always willing to take money. That's not a problem. So, that could change, and I suspect, again, this is, not official word, but I suspect that another financing might be in the works before the resource, because the resource is not going to be done till, late fall, maybe Christmas time kind of thing, right? And certainly by then we'll have used up a large portion of our finances that we have in the bank. So
Thanks, Jim.
you're welcome.
Okay. Steve Highland.
Jim, happy shareholder.
Hey, Steve, how you doing?
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
I've got to ask you questions many of times, and quite frankly, I'd written down 6 questions, and almost everybody has already asked them. But I think one thing that I'd ask about, and I don't know to what extent you can even answer this, given the fact that I'm kind of hinting at you saying something that's material, non-public information, but perhaps you can give us some sort of color on this. And that is the potential for government funding or offtakes or some sort of a strategic investment. Maybe you can give us just some sort of color on if those conversations have been ongoing, if there's been much interest in that, if you think that that's a realistic route.
I would say yes to all three. No, we have been talking to governments, both the New Brunswick government, the Canadian government, and the U.S. government. And as you know, the U.S. government is busy putting lots of money into strategic metals. So we have been talking to them. We have been talking to the Ontario government, the Canadian government, and in fact, we know very well the Assistant Deputy Minister of Natural Resources. We talk to her all the time. And also we talk to the New Brunswick government, and we talk to them all the time. In fact, we had the Minister of Natural Resources visiting our project 3 weeks ago. So yes, government money is something that we're always looking at because, as you know, it's undilutive, right? So we know, for instance, that the American government has put money into a project in New Brunswick, so they're not unfamiliar with New Brunswick. That project was also funded a little bit by the federal government. But again, I think it really all comes down to having a resource so that they can sit down and put some ideas around that. As far as strategic partners, yes, we've talked to various companies who are interested in strategic metals. We don't have anything definitive. We've signed a couple of NDAs and we've sent, data off to a couple of companies. So that's ongoing too. And the offtake agreement, as I mentioned, we talked to a couple of companies, including the company that has an offtake agreement with Larvato. And they've all said kind of the same thing. Like, it would be much easier for us to have these discussions when you have a resource. The other side of that, I always say, well, it's a hell of a lot cheaper now. So, but yes, we are doing those kinds of things.
Okay, one more follow-up question. So I've had conversations with some people who've been involved in antimony in the past. I see what people say on the message boards, and I know that one of the biggest concerns that is out there is the idea that there might not be that much scale to the project, that it might just be sort of a tiny pod, absolutely great intercepts. But I think that the big question is, as you keep alluding to, we got to get that resource out there. If people have concerns about the overall scale of the project, what would you say to them to give them comfort that the potential for this being a lot bigger is there?
Well, two things. First of all, we think we are dealing with a major antimony mineralizing episode here. We know now we have 4 areas of high-grade antimony on our project on only about 20% of our project. our soil sampling 3 kilometers to the south has outlined 2 areas of antimony anomalies in soil. So as far as the scale of the project goes, we don't have any idea. Right now, we think it's about 1.5 kilometers long. Maybe we've drilled it down to 400 meters. That's starting to put some serious volume together. And I think that's right. I think the other side of it, yes, the size is something important, but I think the grade is much more important. So you can make a lot of money off a high grade, smaller project because you have much less CapEx and you have much less operating costs. So I think that's the other side of it as well.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Hey, talk to you again.
Great. Byron King, you're up.
Yes, thank you. I love stibnite and I love antimony projects. And I was just sort of, nodding my head as you're talking about ammunition, and don't forget rocket motors. And then another thing, don't neglect the nuclear angle, because it's a neutron absorber. They use it to harden the lead in reactors, and it also has an angle on quantum dots. So you're a quantum computer, foundational
There
thing.
you go. Yeah.
There you go. I mean, I don't want to get all, that's some of our colleagues here have asked questions that are kind of led up to where I was thinking. And my question really is sort of along the lines of, you know, the geology around there. I mean, you're from there, is this a district sized play, or is this a, kind of like a one and done thing, or do you know enough? Where are you on the geology learning curve to be able to say, where you're at?
Well, on the geology learning curve, the area is well known. It's a well-known belt called the Anadeo Belt. It has lots of gold and base metal showings and a few other antimony showings, but it has never really been systematically explored for antimony. So yes, I would say as a district play, for instance, right next door to us, the company has, I won't mention their name, I won't give them free advertising, but a company has a project that has gold and antimony on it. They have some showings that have been known. And a few kilometers to the northeast from us, there's another project which has some known antimony. So yeah, it could easily be a district play. But just let me put one sort of one proviso on that. And so far it seems that the antimony mineralization, and this has been confirmed by the regional geologist for the area, is related to tension features that strike at right angles to the stratigraphy. Now, what's caused these tension features is still controversial, but we think it might have something to do with the opening of the Maritime Basin, the big Carboniferous basin that's there. Because Susan, that's the regional geologist, she tells us that she sees these tensional features all around the basin. So this might be a very late stage tectonic activity, perhaps some relaxation. We have to remember that this part of the world has been collided by the Atlantic Ocean at least 2 times. You have 2 major orogenies here. So this may be some kind of a relaxation feature related to that. But again, this is all, because this has really just started to be explored and started to be talked about by geologists like the government geologists. We really don't know the answer definitively, but I would say yes, I suspect this is a major antimony mineralizing region. It's certainly a region of base metals and gold, we know that. So antimony would not be unusual.
Okay, well, you just went someplace that I didn't want to go, because I didn't want to get into the geologic history of it, because it's like, but like what, so it's Carboniferous age? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not. We're not sure what the age is. We think it's Devonian, actually.
Oh,
now all the surrounding rocks are Cambrian, so it's much younger than that.
Okay, well, there's a lot going on in that trench in the Devonian days. So, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
I'll leave it there, because we could talk about that all day. Okay, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Me too.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Byron. Doug, you're last. Go ahead and wrap us up. What do you got?
Yeah, nice presentation. Jim was very interested in all of this. Let me go back to a few things that Nick mentioned earlier. So we're dealing with a company here with a 70 million US market cap. You've got about
Right.
4 million of cash right now. Correct me
Yes.
where I'm wrong, where I've made incorrect notes. And you've got a lot of drilling to do. to develop a resource, and but you mentioned that you think your cap costs for putting it into production, which you're anticipating in 3 years, would be about 200 million US. But you're
250,
hoping,
yeah, something like that.
is that's all correct so far?
Yes,
But you're hoping that after it's in production, that it will be turning out, and this is at current antimony prices, and
right.
I'm not sure why antimony got as cheap as it did back when the concentrate was a quarter of what it is today. I don't know if you have a
That's right.
feeling on why it was cheap then. I can see why it's expensive now, but why did it get cheap then? But you think that doing a little bit of arm waving, I mean, guessing that 200 million would be your cash flow 3 years down the road, and that would make this an immensely valuable company. But
Yes.
Do you think you're going out a little too far on a limb, or what gives you that confidence?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what I've done, I don't know if you know the Montana School of Mines. They have a mining model that they've actually spent many, many years putting together, and it works very well. And so I've used their model on this operation. This would be a small underground operation, probably in the order of 750, 500, 600, 750 tons a day, total underground operation. And I use their model with that kind of scenario. And of course, they have factors for dilution and all the rest of that stuff. And that's kind of what you come up with. Now, if, for instance, we decided that we wanted to produce antimony metal right on the site, there would be the additional cost of a hydrometallurgical plant, which would be, I don't know how much, but let's say maybe it doubles the mill cost, takes the mill cost up to 120 million. And the mining infrastructure cost is 100. So maybe you're getting up closer to 300 million if you want to talk about that kind of operation. Now, the thing that we don't know is twofold. First of all, and we have engineers working on this, whether or not the mining method that we chose, which was long hole stoping, whether that will work. Because as you know, you had to have special conditions to make long hole mining work. If those conditions aren't there, and that conditions like free flowing, no changes of size, all those kinds of things, then of course the mining cost is different. But no matter what the numbers are in specifics, this is, you got it on the head, this is a very valuable project.
Okay, now let me ask you something trivial that I'm just wondering, because you're listed on 3 different exchanges.
Right.
How much does it cost to list on the CSE, the Frankfurt, and OTC at the level where you are annually? Do you have that on the top of your head?
I think it's probably about 40,000 a year. So the OTC, it's not that much well, the initial listing costs about 25,000 yearly. I think it's much less than that, maybe 20. The CSE, I believe, is 20 a year. And the Frankfurt, I'm not sure, I can't say, but probably in the same order of magnitude.
Okay. Do you find all 3 of those exchanges to be equally worthwhile? And do you think you'll go for a VSE listing in the future?
I think the Frankfurt listing is very worthwhile. We have a very big following in Germany. The OTCQB hasn't really proved to be that useful yet, to my mind. And the CSE, of course, is a very useful for junior mining. It's probably the best place to list in Canada. So I would say 2 out of 3 are valuable, but we like to have the American listing because a lot of American shareholders like to invest, in American exchange. And as far as upgrading to the TSX, TSXV, that's something we're considering. There's an additional cost, obviously. That's something we're considering, and going to the senior exchange. There's lots of things you have to have a higher market cap, and there's all kinds of complications like that. But if we decided to do that, then the complications could be worked out.
Okay. No, I was just interesting to get the numbers, because we never talk about what it actually costs to list on these exchanges. Just one more thing. What at this stage of the project, what really worries you? I mean, that we may not have asked about, but what's in the back of your mind that might be a real danger with this project?
I think, and what everybody mentions, what happens if China suddenly comes back into the market? And that does worry me a little bit, although, as I've explained, I think the chances of it are fairly low because they need their own, they need their own stuff. I think that's one thing. The other thing I think that worries me is that we think it's fairly consistent, but once we do the modeling, maybe it shows not quite the consistency that we think, because, these kinds of deposits, these epithermal type deposits, are notoriously erratic. We think this one's pretty good. When we take a look at the model, we can sort of line up all the intersections and say, yeah, they're there. But when it comes down to actually doing the resource, have we got enough drilling to actually make the consultants confident that they can calculate a resource? We have aimed for 50-meter drill spacing, and we have, in some of the central parts of the main zone, we have better than that, but there's no guarantee that that's going to be really close enough until we actually get some work done on the statistics and the rest of the modeling. So that's one thing.
I'm trying to recall, and I may be wrong, but this is mostly not very deep. You're talking about most of the deposit being up within 150 meters of surface. Is that right?
Well, it goes up to surface, and we've traced it down to 400 meters, but I would say we've drilled it in detail down to 250 meters.
Okay, so you think that this 5,000 meters of drilling that you have planned by year end, you think that's going to get you to the stage where you can put out a resource estimate?
Well, we already have 45 drill holes into this part of the project. What the current drill program will be doing will be trying to fill in any gaps that there is in the drilling. As I said, we're aiming at 50-meter drilling, and also we'll be doing some of that drilling to try to understand more about it below 250 meters, and also along strike to the north and south. So that's kind of what that program is working on, and that'll be about 10,000 meters of drilling, by the way.
And that's when you're going to raise some more money towards the end of the year.
I would think so. Yes, I would think so.
Okay. Oh, very good. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us.
John, you've got a quick question. Go ahead.
Yeah, just it's kind of along the same lines. If people are out there in the retail market now, would they buy the stock now, or would they wait until that resource estimate comes out? Because often, these nice drill holes that look like very, very high grade get diluted out as those wireframes are set up and the measurements actually comes out. What should we be advising now?
Well, I'm not allowed to advise people to buy, but I would say it's a pretty good buy right now.
So you think that there's not so much hype on these very nice, highly the very rich ore, and that it's going to stay looking awfully good when the resource estimate comes out?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've been talking all along that the average will probably be between 3% and 4%. Although, as you saw in we get lots of high grade intersections, and we think that in the end, that's kind of where we'll settle down, in that kind of range. And we will continue to put out the same kind of numbers. That in some ways, it's a little boring because we keep putting out the same kind of numbers from the main zone. But I think, I guess it sort of depends on a person's risk level. If they want the certainty, or let's call it semi-certainty, of having a resource, that's one thing. If they're willing to sort of take the risk that it's going to be, much better down the road, then, now would be the time to buy. But again, I'm not allowed to say that. So.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Yeah, we are. Yeah. Well, Jim, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate, as Mickey said, very succinct and to the point. It was really great. So thank you for joining us. We'll ask you to step out now, and I'll send you a copy of the recording.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. All right, guys. What do you think? I mean, one of the things we did, I think the numbers he was quoting, unless I'm looking at this wrong, EB, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the market cap is substantially below where he said.
Yeah. He's got 93 million shares in the float, so 58 million Canadian. Here's what's interesting. I mean, I doubt a lot of people are going to buy based on the geology. It's important, but I think what drives this, like, look at this Dominery that's on his deck. I mean, that's the investment bank that's gotten a lot of funky press about their association with Trump. But in this case, I think that's a good thing, because the critical metal movement is happening now. I mean, if you're a critical metal company, this is the moment you've been waiting for. And this stock went to $1.65 Canadian in March, and it's 60 cents. I mean, obviously he's going to raise money. They haven't really raised that much money. I mean, unless they did something really small. I mean, I don't see that much done over 20 cents. So I mean, I think it's clear they have the U.S. connected bank they want. They have a couple decent shareholders. The project seems fine. It trades a lot, by the way. I mean, like, you trade 800,000 shares a day on the CSE is a lot. Doug was asking about the exchanges. I mean, these are not good exchanges. Like, this is sort of the B grade of trading. I mean, a lot of U.S. banks like Fidelity and the brokers, they don't even let people buy on these exchanges. I mean, so you're definitely making it harder, not easier, for Americans. American market's 10 times the size, and everybody knows the defense is an American story. So, look, I mean, 60 cents, it's cheapened itself out. I mean, if you look at the chart, it's like, it's decent. This is decent. This is the time. If it's going to work, it's going to work now. And Jim seems totally competent. I don't know. I mean, I'm not that excited about these esoteric metals, but I mean, this one, it's like everything's pretty lined up. This could work.
Yeah. I was thinking the same. Who else? Byron, yeah.
A simple way to look at it is compared to Tragan and Larvado, and on a project basis, they're comparable enough that those are good comparisons, and both are much higher valuations. So I think there's a simple way to look at the near-term upside potential on this.
Yeah, makes sense. Byron, go ahead.
I was going to say, there are not a lot of antimony projects, period. And there are not a lot of good antimony projects, period. I mean, I am astonished at, say, Perpetua. They have sold the Brooklyn Bridge on that one, I mean, there's ore in the ground, but okay, great. Your grade is like that. I love grade, and this is the grade is king here. This is pretty good stuff that he's talking about. Considering the price, the market cap, considering where everybody else is. And the antimony story, China, they're going to come in and lower the prices and wipe everybody out. I don't think so. From what I understand of what's going on in China right now, they're husbanding their own stuff because they need it. Ammunition, rocket motors, nuclear, quantum dots, all that stuff. I mean, you never say never, but I think a good antimony project, with grade is probably a good idea right about now. Price seems cheap enough, considering, we were just talking about it was $1.60. Now it's at 65 or whatever. So, that's my thoughts.
That's good. Yeah. Dominic.
Yeah, I speak as someone who made and lost a lot of money in an antimony company in the last cycle. And this would be about 15 years ago. And it's one of those niche metals, one of those strategic metals where if you can get out there and tell the story, it's a really compelling story. And as Mr. Tucker says, its time is now with the rage about strategic metals in the US and so on. If it's going to make it, now is its time. But I wonder, I don't want to sound too negative, but I wonder if its time has already gone. This stock was trading 2 or 3 years ago. This was literally 2 cents, 3 cents. And then, only last year it was a 20-cent stock, and it went all the way to $1.60 in March.
And now it's just in a really strong downtrend. And you know what these juniors are like when they spike up and then they come back, the downtrends can just go on and on and on and on because, you know, there's just so many people who are on the wrong side of the trade who get frustrated with it. So, you know, every year there's like a new niche metal. One year it's or a new niche commodity. One year it might be antimony, then it's cobalt, then it's lithium, then it's this, then it's that. And there are very few ways of playing antimony, and it is a genuinely important metal. And the grades are good. I will say that the grades are good. And if this thing can actually get producing rather than just be a sort of a promotional vehicle, it looks very good. But my other concern, as EB says, is it's not on the venture. You know, CSE stocks are limited in how much capital can come in. He said a lot of their money is in Germany, which is not bad. But and again, he's not trading that much in the US, but it does trade a lot. So I'd like to see this on the venture, but you know, it could work. All I see, I just look at that chart and I just see a downtrend with a lot of people losing a lot of money. So I'd be reluctant to dive in at this stage myself.
Okay. Yeah, Brent, what do you think?
If, as he says, he's got a 2 to 4 meter wide vein that's running 3 to 4% antimony by 700 plus meters on strike, 200 plus meters depth, and exploration upside based on the soils. This sounds pretty interesting. But until I see that stuff put up on his website, we really don't know what continuity and what issues there are inside it. So I'm waiting to see, and I'm really disappointed in the website. It's crap. But if, you know, he should be putting out these sections.
I'll ask him if he has something he can share with us that I'll send around to everybody if he has something available.
Yeah, that'd be great. So it's a story until I get to see what's really happening. So that's my opinion. But on the surface, it looks interesting.
Awesome. Okay, Mickey, what do you think?
Very strong geological discovery. I think that is to their credit. I think they have a structural problem there. They don't take oriented core. I would promulgate the idea that the mineralization controls are structural. He did not even mention if they have a structural geologist amongst their PhDs. The metallurgy is of concern with 46% recovery and a likely arsenic problem. Now that's probably solvable, but at a cost. And finally, I've had this discussion with a few of you guys lately. Is this 2016, 2020 deja vu all over again? So that said, I'm cautious.
Okay. Graham, what do you think?
I just was noting how confident he seemed. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd be curious, but I don't recall previously somebody speaking to us and saying, I think it's a great time to buy the stock, as sort of confidently as he seemed to be. And I take that in line with him hinting that they're in discussions behind the scenes with the Trump administration. And I can't help just wondering if he knows something he's not allowed to let on. But regardless, I was quite struck by the confidence. Yeah, I mean, multiple times, like, I think it's a good time. I think it's a good time. I think it's a good time.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely comes off as confident, but confidence also was definitely there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, Steve asked that question, the question he can't answer, but I think he gave us some hints, at least, that there's conversations.
Well, he was probably confident at $1.60 too.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's, short-term price, but I mean, he seems like he has let's make this a mine idea rather than, an E.B. Tucker approach where let's say the stock is going to go up.
Hey, easy now.
I know.
We could do quite well on that,
I know. No problem with it. All right. Well, great. Anyone else have anything else they want to add? No? Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you guys very much again. I really appreciate it. And this will be published next Tuesday, just so you know. All right, guys.
Thanks.
Take care. Happy 4th of July.
You.
Take care.